today's June CNCF Eastern Canada meetup. We've got some great speakers today. We've got Daniel and Dan. But yeah, as we file in, it looks like we have a great crowd, about 40 people, and I'm sure that's going to grow. We've had some good attendance as of late. So agenda for today, we've got usual housekeeping, got a couple things from the community, and then we've got our two great talks, one from Dan O'Brien from Ambassador about Emissary-Ingress, and then we've got a second talk from Dan Papandrea for runtime security and Falco. And of course, we have our usual survey, so stay tuned for the survey. By completing the survey, you are entered into our sort of usual meetup raffle where there are prizes, so make sure you fill that out. Keep your eye out for that QR code.
And I'll be dropping the shareable link in the chat as well if you want to fill it out as we go. So.
Fantastic.
Good luck.
All right. Next slide. Sweet. So we'll be your hosts. I'm Jason. I'm from Ecobee. We also have Johan and Michael on the panel as well for hosts. And next slide. You may recognize us from the regular glut of meetup organizers. We sort of share the host spotlight once in a while. A couple of these folks are in the chat, so say hi if you do see them. As always, thank you to our sponsors. We have Elastic and JFrog. And if your company is interested in becoming a sponsor, head to that link, scan that QR code, and we'll happily provide you more information about what it means to be a sponsor for our meetup. Today's speakers, so again, it's ourselves giving the housekeeping update, and then we've got Daniel from Ambassador and Dan from Sysdig. Just some housekeeping. And before we get started, I think it's important to recognize some of the current events in Canada. And the Eastern Canadian CNCF group just wants to pause and take a moment momentarily in remembrance of the 215 children found at the Kamloops Indian Residential School. And we just want to pause to honor them and all others who lost their lives to the residential school system. So just take a couple moments here. All right. Okay. So jumping into things, our socials are all available. We've got LinkedIn, Twitter, and Slack, and a lot of us are active on Slack. It's a great place to talk about all things CNCF and Cube. And always, we are looking for talks of people who want to participate in our meetups. Currently, things are still virtual, just like this. So we have our virtual tech talk, which is our longer format sessions, which is what we have today. But we are always looking for these cloud native stories, which are sort of smaller events. So if you have something or you're doing something at your company that's particularly interesting and you just want to spend a couple minutes telling the community what you've done, that's a perfect time. And so please visit these CFP links, or you can ask in the chat for these links later, and we'll be happy to have you. And yeah, now moving on to some CNCF announcements. May was a quiet month, but a couple things happened. So KubeCon EU, it's all wrapped up. And if you missed it, no worries. All 228 videos are available on YouTube, all hosted in one nice playlist. So check that out on YouTube, on the CNCF YouTube channel. But the action doesn't stop. KubeCon North America is happening in October, and happy to announce that it's actually a hybrid event, so virtual and in person. So if you are clear to travel, and hopefully when things open back up, hopefully we'll see some of you in LA and California in October. Registration hasn't opened yet. I think CFP's just closed recently, but registration will be opening this summer, so keep an eye out for that. In terms of recent release news, our friends at Argo have released Argo rollouts to 1.0, which is a sort of indicator of its maturity and production readiness. And if you're not familiar with rollouts, it's sort of a tool used for progressive delivery. So things like blue-green deployments or canary deployment and much, much more. And lastly, if you're not surveyed out already, the CNCF survey for 2021 is out. And you can share your thoughts on cloud, containers, Cube, CNCF, all those great things. And if you fill it out, you might win a chance to get a full pass to KubeCon EU 2022. Now, I'm never too early to start thinking about next year. That's due mid-month, and check it out. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Daniel Bryant, the Director of Dev Relations, and we'll give a talk today for Emissary-Ingress 101, an introduction to the CNCF incubation level API gateway. Daniel, take us away.
Appreciate it, Jason. Thank you very much. I'll just share my screen.
Stop sharing real quick.
Yeah, we're good. Always that moment of will it work? How are we looking?
And for anybody watching, if you want to leave questions in the chat, we'll have a brief Q&A period after. So I'll be cataloging them as we go, and I'll be throwing some questions Daniel's way. So feel free to drop some questions in the chat and take it away.
Appreciate it. Good stuff, guys. So we'll get started. So hopefully many of you know of Emissary-Ingress, but if you don't, a quick overview to get us started. It is an open source cloud native API gateway powered by Envoy Proxy. And Envoy Proxy, pretty much the de facto proxy in the cloud native space, of course. We know and love the Lyft folks who originated the tech. And if you go, CNCF meetup, right, you pretty much bump into Envoy everywhere. It's good stuff. Now, you may not have heard of Emissary-Ingress. We're definitely getting some folks saying, where's this tech coming from? We've actually done a bit of a rebrand. So the tech was formerly known as the Ambassador API Gateway. The reason the rebranding's happened is when you donate to the CNCF, when you give a project to the CNCF and it goes into open governance, you have to give up all the IP. Of course, our company is called Ambassador Labs, so we couldn't give up that IP. So a slight renaming there, Emissary, Envoy, Ambassador, there's the playing of words around these spaces. It's all the same tech under the hood, just a different name, Emissary-Ingress. We deliberately pitched it as an incubation level project. I'm sure some of you have bumped into Telepresence, which is our sandbox dev-focused tool that we donated to the CNCF. But because Ambassador and Emissary are so well used and so well known and battle tested in prod, we deliberately pitched it at the incubation level. So we can go into more details of that in the Q&A if you're interested in that. But the SIG networking team that CNCF, got to give a massive hat tip to them, Lee Clarkota and the team. They gave us lots of great feedback, and that's why we deliberately chose to pitch at the incubation level with the project. And that's been great so far. Emissary-Ingress is developer focused. You can argue that an API gateway is sort of an operations platform, sysadmin kind of tool, but we've deliberately, and the community have come together to deliberately enable developers to use the tool. And we'll go into some more of that later on. But at the moment, you can configure Emissary-Ingress with CRDs, Ingress resources. There's a bit of support with the Gateway API, brand new Gateway API. And we historically used a lot of annotations. We like to lean folks more towards the CRD route now and Ingress and so forth, just because that's more well-defined, but you can also use annotations to configure the API gateway if you're interested in doing that. We've had wide adoption. I'll mention a few hat tips at the end of the talk, but wide adoption over the past 4 years. Community's been amazing. People using it in production, staging, dev, really battle testing it. And now the product, the tool has become so sort of hardened or there's use cases popping up everywhere that we're really confident now that it's a great tool for your use case, for example. You're not just picking up some brand new technology. It's been through the ropes at many awesome organizations and at the hands of many folks in the community too. It's an API gateway. I'm guessing many folks sort of familiar with the API gateway space. It's kind of like DevOps, though. API gateway means many things to many people. It can mean reverse proxy all the way through to like Apogee, API lifecycle management. We're sort of a bit in the middle with Emissary-Ingress. We're a bit more than reverse proxy. We don't offer full API lifecycle management like Apogee, 3Scale, all that kind of good tech. Fundamentally, an API gateway in this context is about getting traffic from your end users into your Kubernetes services. So we've got Jane here accessing, /quote on the domain name, traffic going through to a backend service. Traffic management 101, all the proxies, all the API gateways in the cloud native space, do this and do it very well. You also might have Mark, doing quote update, going to a different backend service. Totally makes sense, but it might break the connections. Yeah. It might be the case of the backend service going offline, Mark trying to do some, denial of service, all a bunch of different things like that. So in addition to the basic routing, you want things like app security, IP denial, rate limiting, all these things as well to stop, accidentally malicious behavior and deliberate malicious behavior as well. You need things in an API gateway like observability. You don't necessarily need to, do that, but you need to integrate with the accepted standards. Prometheus, is a good example. Tracing, Jaeger, Zipkin, that kind of thing. Rate limiting is really useful in an API gateway, both from, let's say, nefarious things, and even if you're doing, say, a business model where you've got freemium users and non-freemium users, paid users, you might want to rate limit your freemium users so they don't degrade the performance for your paying users when they're under big load, for example, when your back-end services are under heavy load. Rate limiting is super useful. Resilience, timeouts, retries, circuit breakers, all that kind of good stuff you need in a modern API gateway too. And it needs to be friendly in app development terms. I've mentioned this already, but big focus on Ambassador Labs, big focus on the community around Emissary is on making the use of the API gateway as friendly for developer persona as possible. My background's a Java developer. Java's my native language, bit of Go, bit of JavaScript as well. And when I went from Java to I used to rack and stack tin, to be honest, but then I went to VMs, then I went to Mesos, and then Kubernetes. Massive learning curve for me, right? And I'm sure it is for many folks. So we try and make Emissary as friendly for developers new to Kubernetes as possible. In terms of core features, I've sort of pulled out a few already. So we've got resilience. I definitely think things like auth and rate limiting are worth calling out here. In the open source edition, Emissary itself, Emissary-Ingress, all the interfaces are exposed for you. So there's ext authz and there's rls.proto, where you can code your own auth service or code your own rate limiting service. Emissary-Ingress doesn't come with those out of the box. Our community offering of the Ambassador Edge Stack and the commercial offerings do come with those with auth services and rate limiting out of the box, but you can definitely code your own. There's lots of documentation out there. Quick search on Google, on GitHub. I think there's a bunch of community auth providers. Be careful, because obviously auth is super important. Do your due diligence if you're bringing anything in from GitHub. The rate limiting is a bit more straightforward. I've actually got a Java example that I coded up a couple of years ago. If you're interested in seeing how rate limiting works with Emissary, I coded up with the proto definition, created my Java stubs and coded up an example of a leaky bucket algorithm, I think. So there's plenty of stuff out there if you do want to code these things yourself. Observability, big focus on distributed tracing, real-time metrics, logs, good old Envoy under the hood, spitting out lots of amazing stuff if you're debugging. Big focus on being cloud native and integrating with the space. So I'll name check Linkerd in a minute. Got a name check Consul as well. I'll go into more details of how they can provide service discovery, which is super useful. But also in terms of cloud native things like zero downtime config, stateless high availability architectures. A lot of the API gateways I worked on back in my Java days, they used to store a lot of the data, the state in a data store, like a Postgres or MySQL, and that sometimes became a point of contention, or if it fell over, then the gateway didn't behave as it should. So we've deliberately, the community and Ambassador Labs have come together to focus on Emissary-Ingress being stateless in the way it works. And finally, lots of great L7, layer 7 in the OSI model, lots of great support, all your standards, right? HTTP 1, 1.1, 2, gRPC, really popular. We see a lot of folks doing gRPC and also gRPC web now at the front end. If you haven't bumped into gRPC web, well worth a Google. But we see a lot of folks using those gRPC for mobile clients, gRPC web for web clients as well. Of course, TCP, WebSockets, SNI if you're doing multiple hosts and TLS and so forth. But all the kind of features you would expect from a good cloud native API gateway. Emissary is built on Envoy Proxy. It's kind of like the engine, or in the common parlance we like to use today is Envoy is the data plane and Emissary-Ingress is the control plane. So Emissary-Ingress provides a nice developer-friendly way of configuring Envoy Proxy. Emissary-Ingress is not on the hot path of traffic. Envoy Proxy does all the heavy lifting, manages all the traffic, does it amazingly well. But configuring Envoy Proxy is quite tricky as a human. Envoy Proxy is designed very much sort of a machine configuration. And think of Emissary-Ingress as your translation layer. There are, of course, other API gateways out there. There's Contour in the CNCF. There's Kong and other folks do similar things with different proxies. But with Emissary-Ingress, Envoy is our core data plane, our core engine, if you like, that's doing all the hard work. And you can think of Emissary as Ambassador's open core. So Emissary is the open source product. You can go along, look at the source code, build it yourself, run it yourself, happy days. Lots of folks do that in production too. But you can also then get the Ambassador API Gateway, the Ambassador Edge Stack, I should say, and that offers a community edition and a commercial edition. Some extra features out of the box like auth and rate limiting, and of course commercial support, but we're not here to pitch that today. In terms of use cases, so the obvious one is north-south comms, right? Getting the user traffic into the back end. And this we see Emissary-Ingress used all the time. Like literally some folks, pick up the source code, deploy it into prod, and away they go. They need very simple requirements, mapping a route to the back end. Job done. We see also some folks splitting internal and external. So there's no problems with running multiple emissaries in a single cluster. Or you can have one emissary spread, routing traffic on multiple namespaces, these kind of things. There's many different ways of configuring this, so you get a finer grain of a sort of more granularity, I should say, of control of traffic. We also bump in quite a lot to what we've called the hub and spoke model. And this, if anyone's been using like Amazon, like to do like ELBs and those kind of things, Amazon Web Services, I've often used this pattern there. But folks are using Emissary-Ingress is kind of like an enterprise service bus. Any of you as old as me will recognize that term. If you sort of look at it a bit funny, people could even say this is like a service mesh. Do you mean you're routing all your traffic external from your users and internal traffic? You're routing it all through the API gateway. So you're doing north, south, and east, west. And it's at this point, people usually start shouting at me and start saying like, whoa, you should not be using an API gateway as a service mesh. This is not a good look. And like, no worries, service meshes, we've got you covered. We do offer that functionality. We see folks using Emissary in any which way possible, but we do integrate with all the main service meshes as well. So don't worry, I'm not saying if you want to go service mesh, you have to use Emissary-Ingress. You can totally plug into Consul, Istio, Linkerd, and I'll go into some more details on that a bit later too. So in terms of config, this is what you experience. If you're coding away, standard CRD, I'm sure many of you are using things like Argo, using other things, and we've created a mapping custom resource. If you've configured any kind of proxy in the past, this shouldn't be a big shock. We've got the prefix in the spec mapping to a backend Kubernetes service. It literally is as simple as that. You can configure TLS, you can bring your own certificate, you can plug in Let's Encrypt, for example, as an Acme provider. The Edge stack does that automatically for you. You have to do a bit more implementation on Emissary-Ingress, open source edition, but it's totally possible. You can, I frequently plug in with Let's Encrypt, get myself a domain name, put a TLS cert on that, and it's super useful for testing even TLS as well. The mapping is deceptively simple, but you can go quite, it's quite rich config. Just one example I pulled out here. A lot of folks often ask me about this, and I've got Argo on the brain at the moment, so we're doing a lot of work in Argo. But if you want to do super simple canarying between two mappings, you can see here on the left, the two mappings, both with the prefix quote, but we've got two different services. We've got quote in the top, we've got fancy quote in the bottom. And I put a weight of 10 in the bottom mapping. So that now means when someone hits /quote, 10% of traffic is going to be fancy quote, and 90% of traffic is going to be hitting the old quote. So you can do some like basic canary releasing here as well. You can do a bunch of things like rewriting. So if you've got like different postfixes, different URLs you want to map, you can totally do that as well. The docs go into all detail on this. So if you want to know more, hit up the docs. I recommend doing that. I mentioned that building your own auth service, you can totally do that. And here's some examples of how you might configure an auth service. Passing the headers across, which headers you want being passed backwards and forwards and so forth. Again, have a look at the auth service docs, goes into lots of detail about all the configuration you need and want for your auth. In general, we see mappings being controlled by dev teams. And this is primarily when folks are doing the you build it, you run it thing, right? So we see a lot of folks in the community and customers we chat to are doing this now. So developers, they build their service, and then they'll also be responsible for releasing it, maybe canarying a little bit, these kind of things as well. And we typically see things like auth, TLS management, all that kind of good stuff, service mesh integration with more of the ops platform persona. Your mileage may vary. Happy to take questions on this in the end. I think the main thing to watch from the developer persona is watching for clashes. Particularly if you've got multiple teams that are all autonomous, and if you end up defining the same routes, you can get some funny behavior. But other than that, you can literally all be spinning up your own mappings, working fully autonomously. And ops have set up nice safe guardrails with TLS and auth and rate limiting, and we as developers can just write our mappings and happy days, right? We do also support the Ingress spec if you're interested in that. So what you see on the right here is the Kubernetes networking Ingress spec, which is equivalent roughly to the two boxes on the left, a standard custom resource mapping, and we have hosts in Emissary-Ingress. Some folks have already used Ingress. They've got it baked into their workflow, so they want to stick with Ingress specs. We recommend going towards the custom resources, but we totally support Ingress if that's your chosen way of configuring your Ingress, your API gateway in Kubernetes. There's been some super early work. I think actually Alex Gavay, who's on the call, can go into more detail on this than I can. But the new Ingress spec, I think it was called Service API for a while, and then it's changed to to Gateway API. We do support a limited subset of, I think it's V1 Alpha 1. So if you're interested in sort of the official specs and how they evolve, check out the Gateway API. Some good docs on the Kubernetes SIG. Networking SIG, and we've put some docs up on what we support, and obviously it will continually evolve as we contribute code, as the community contributes code as well. So multiple ways of configuring, depending on what works best for you and your team. I mentioned service meshes, so we've got you covered, right, with the main service meshes, because a lot of folks I chat to in the community and commercially, they maybe don't want a service mesh now, but they know in the future they might, and they want to have this north-south solution that plays well with what we call east-west. So north-south for ingress, getting traffic in, east-west for service-to-service comms, and we literally play well with the three main service meshes, and I'm sure there's community additions for the other meshes out there too as well. I've got a riff on a classic meme here, right? I've been doing a lot of work with Linkerd of late. So I've got the South Park, classic South Park meme, right? Of make money with Emissary-Ingress and Linkerd. And of course, phase one is always obvious, right? In our case, it's install Linkerd. Phase two, a bit more of a challenge. But with Emissary-Ingress and Linkerd, phase two is literally add Linkerd headers true to your YAML. It is that simple to get started. And just as an example over here, I pulled out an Ambassador module. You can see the add Linkerd headers true config, and you can see in my namespace, I've already installed Linkerd in this cluster. You can see I'm saying linkerd.io inject enabled. So all my services I deploy automatically get the Linkerd injection. Good to go. If you want to know more details, massive hat tip to Jason Morgan, buddy of ours from Buoyant, who are the folks behind Linkerd. He did a great talk at Ambassador Fest where he literally live configured Emissary-Ingress with Linkerd. And it's like 20 minutes, he literally live codes it, talks about the process. So massive hat tip, massive thank you to Jason. And you can check out that video. I think I've got the link, on the top if you want to know more about that. I'm a huge HashiCorp fan. Anyone knows me, so I've got to shout out HashiCorp Consul. My buddy Nick Jackson and I did a talk, this is quite a while ago now, but using Consul and what was Ambassador API Gateway, Emissary. And we did a whole bunch of talking around the one really cool thing with Consul is providing your Emissary-Ingress can route to network locations outside of your Kubernetes cluster. You can use Consul as the single source of truth for service discovery. So you can basically spin up Consul, put all your Kubernetes services in there. There's some nice plugins and integration with Kubernetes and Consul, but you can also load in details of services running on VMs. So if I did a GCP example, spun up a couple of Java apps on GCP VMs, made sure they were network routable from my Kubernetes cluster, from my Emissary-Ingress. And then in Consul, not only did I have my Kubernetes service details with the actual services, but I also had the IP addresses and ports of my external services running on VMs. And then Emissary, Ambassador, could route to those VMs as well as Kubernetes services. And you can use that during a migration. So that's one of Consul's superpowers with Emissary-Ingress. In terms of observability, mandatory these days, right, to integrate Prometheus, Grafana, like Prometheus integration, we literally expose Envoy's metrics endpoint, the stats D as well. I'll mention Datadog in just a second. I've got some Datadog stuff. But we also support tracing. If you're using Jaeger, Zipkin, Lightstep, anything that supports like the B3 headers, for example, it's as easy as configuring a tracing service. And then Emissary-Ingress can inject headers. Then you'll need to propagate, of course, through the stack. With any distributed tracing system, you need to propagate the headers that get injected through the stack so you can join up the spans. But Emissary-Ingress, totally down with that too. I did a talk with Ara Polido from Datadog. We were using OpenShift and we were doing some debugging. Ara was going through all the profiling of Datadog. She hooked it up to Emissary, Ambassador at the time, and it was super awesome. So check out the video that we did. She's deep diving and showing how to debug an issue from when it enters the cluster how it transits to a service and profiling a service. And R had literally hooked up all the Datadog metrics, the traces, the profiling in Python. Awesome stuff. So if you want to know more about that, check out that video with R and myself. I've got to give a massive hat tip to Alex Gavay on the call, of course. Alex recently at Ambassador Fest did an observability and discovery for developers. He talked about the need to not only observe systems, but understand them, particularly, 3 a.m., everything's blowing up, PagerDuty's firing away, right? You need to be able to understand your systems. And Alex joined the dots between the A8R.io spec, where you can basically annotate your Kubernetes services. So it literally is as simple as in your Kubernetes YAML, service YAML, or use a kubectl annotate command. If you follow the spec, the A8R.io spec, you can add metadata to your services that can then point to, GitHub location, can point to your Grafana dashboard, your Prometheus instance, these kind of things. So great talk, 15 minutes, 20 minutes talk of Alex, joining the dots for observability and understandability. And we in the community have worked really hard in Emissary-Ingress to expose all the metrics, all the traces, and the logs that you need as a developer and as an operator too. So adoption. It's been, well, I think it's like 4 years. I joined the company literally a month after the initial release of Ambassador. It's been awesome. It's been like 4 years of great feedback, iterations. We donated to the CNCF when we started last summer, and it went in officially in April 2021. Plenty of GitHub stars, because we all love our GitHub stars, right? It's a good vanity metric. Probably more indicative of the community, as we've got 5,000 folks on our Slack channel now. Great discussions, great questions. Do join us if you've got any questions there. 160 contributions, which blows my mind every time, ranging from docs fixes all the way through to quite meaty features. The Puppet team, Noah Fontes, did some Knative work, and there's been lots of awesome work contributed over the years. I've got at this point mentioned, like, usually someone in the audience goes like, oh, why, it's classic hacker news moment, right? Why is that company so big? I could do that in a weekend. Someone usually says, why is that Emissary-Ingress so big or so complicated or whatever? Actually, getting traffic into your cluster reliably, observably, securely is really, really hard. And it comes down to the cloud native superpower, right? The people and the community. What you see in Emissary-Ingress is the result of all the amazing work of the community over the last 4 years. So I'm sure a lot of folks could spin up a reverse proxy in a weekend. You can spin up a bit of Go code, pretty good proxying, right? But all the lessons learned, the knowledge, the experience, the battle scars has gone into Emissary-Ingress from the community. So rather than do your own thing, I say join us, right? Come and join us. And we're only just getting started now because of the CNCF donation. We all love CNCF here. It's fantastic in terms of opening up the project to more people, providing more open governance. Like, it's just, I'm so looking forward to the next few years to see where Emissary-Ingress goes. And you're going to be a large part of that, right? If you want to get involved, you can really make a difference. So the secret sauce here really is the community. Please do get involved. We've got a lot of production deployments. If you want to check out various KubeCon talks, I think Alex has done the talks I mentioned before, App Direct, I'm sure many of you know and love. Go Spot Check, Ticketmaster, OneFootball, lots of presentations there. You can see and hear from folks actually using it in production, using Emissary-Ingress, Ambassador, and learn from their successes, learn from their mistakes as well. I always like to see stuff adopted in production because you really get to, the warts and all, right? You get to know the tricky stuff as well as the good stuff. If you do want to get started, pop along to the website here. I'll share the slide deck later. A Google or your favorite web search will also turn you up with the OSS docs as well. So do jump on there. We have, if you want to get started with the Edge stack, which is the, building on the open core, Alex and the team actually, and I worked on this a bit as well. We've got something called the Kubernetes initializer. If you're from the Java world and you're familiar with Spring initializer, there's Python initializer too. Similar deal. If you want to get started, you can configure all your cloud load balancer config. You can configure service mesh and a bunch of other stuff just by clicking on a few details in the web form, and it will spit out some YAML for you to apply. So a couple of options there. You can dive into the docs, deploy super simple. If you want a bit of a richer setup, start playing around with, check out the Kate's initializer. We'd love your feedback on that too. We've designed it to be as easy as possible to get started with the cloud. And at that point, that is it. Hit me up on Twitter, GitHub, LinkedIn, @DanielBryantUK. Got my email there as well. We'd love to see you at the office hours. We run regular office hours. I believe Flynn, the lead maintainer of Emissary, is doing an office hours in 2 weeks' time, 2 weeks on Thursday, I think. But if you pop along to our Slack or hit us up on any of the communication channels, Twitter, etc., we'll let you know exactly when the next developer office hours is running. The Slack is the best place. All the news goes in Slack, atar.io/Slack. All the questions you want to ask, you can jump in the Slack channel. You can find me there. You can find the rest of the team. Would love to see you there and get you involved. Thanks so much. Happy to take some questions.
Awesome. Fantastic talk, Daniel. I appreciate hearing about Ambassador-Ingress. I think really it's like Emissary-Ingress. I mean, for me, it's like, how many people can I level up past Nginx Ingress? It's like, let's move on let's level up our game. So we do have a couple minutes. Maybe Michael, if you want to lob a few questions towards Daniel from the chat. You might be muted.
That's definitely true. There's a question about security behind the paywall. Curious, is there any community auth plugins available? And I'll also add on one more question of what are the security advantages behind the paywall that people can take advantage of?
So there is a bunch of open source offerings, but I would say do your due diligence. If you Google around, like I know I found a few in GitHub where folks have written their own auth service. So definitely stuff out there. Be a bit careful on that one. In terms of the paywall, Mike, do you mean like the actual commercial offering of Ambassador?
Yeah, that's just how the question was phrased. But yeah, the commercial offering and kind of what's the advantages of using the commercial offering versus code it yourself, open source.
How we love that kind of question, right?
Yeah,
that's a great question. Yeah. So we have our standard edition, our community edition, where you get an auth service and rate limiting a bunch of other stuff out of the box. And we offer, I think it's up to 5 requests per second is included in the community edition. So if you want to, you can literally download the Edge stack, plug it in, and as long as your auth service and your rate limiting service are under 5 RPS, happy days. But if you want to get commercial support, where we do like up to 24/7, 365 support, or you want to go super large scale, then there is commercial offerings where we will enable that for you and support you along the way as well.
Nice. And in terms of support, is that support for any XKS cloud offering, also with integration into the different service meshes? What's the kind of full range of support that you guys have? Yeah.
So, we support Emissary-Ingress, we support Ambassador Edge Stack and its integration. So we wouldn't necessarily like debug, say, an AKS problem or an EKS problem if we know it's the cloud, but we'd be as helpful as possible. Do you know what I mean? Often it's a case of a bit of friction point. Do you know what I mean? Like some of the DNS resolution doesn't work in AKS. Maybe an Envoy patch has slightly tweaked something. So we would totally work with customers, particularly on a Sev 1, right? We'd be on it completely until they've got it resolved. But most of the stuff is just helping people locate where an issue is. And then if it's within our code, we would totally fix that as soon as we could. Often it's a case of, hey, integration here's broken, or you've got to enable this in your cloud provider, these kind of things. But we've literally seen every cloud provider in production. Pretty confident that everything from IBM, DigitalOcean, all your main clouds, Packet, bunch of they've changed the name recently, but yeah, we've seen so many. Like over the last 4 years, we've been sort of offering commercial support. We've probably seen your cloud.
Nice. I know you contribute to the blog. The WTF is cloud native, right? Because that's one of my other favorite ones at Ambassador.
Well, the container solutions.
Yeah, container solutions ones. Yeah. I've seen you on there before.
That's right. Yep.
So I was going to say, do you recommend people check that out? And then do you have any other places that users can follow you, get started, learn a little bit more about the product?
Yeah, for sure. Got to shout out the container solutions folks like Jamie. And I actually worked with him in the past, Jamie Dobson, and like one of my ex-bosses now works there as well. They are awesome. So yes, I did a WTF cloud native, and like I sort of gave my thoughts on the CNCF and the community and things. So check them out. They do some awesome stuff. Got to shout out our own thing. Go to the Ambassador blog as well. Particularly if folks are new to Kubernetes, we're doing something called Summer of Kates. Summer of Kubernetes. I'm literally jumping off onto a live stream after this, where my colleagues and I were getting folks bootstrapped. So today I'm talking about build packs, CNCF build packs. I'm talking about Docker files. Last week we did a local dev environment 101. We set up Kubi and we set up Minikube and ran folks through setting up sort of a nice dev loop. So if people are interested in getting started with Kubernetes, getting started with CNCF tech, quick Google, quick search for Summer of Kates. I'd love to see them on there. We've got a Slack channel set up, some live streams, and some office hours are running on Zoom as well.
Fantastic.
Hey, Daniel, can I ask questions as well? Very quick one.
Yeah, actually.
You know, you mentioned that you had these annotations for Ingress, but now you
Yes.
kind of went with your own CRD that provides much more flexibility in terms of what you can configure. You're probably aware that Kubernetes community went with the new gateway API. It's like a new spec for Ingress.
Yeah.
Do you think this is a future for the Ingress that will be like standard for everyone, or you are still going to be focusing to build your own CRDs? And maybe because of your CNCF project, you think this is going to be a new standard?
I think there's a place for all these things. And the analogy that I often use is like the service mesh interface. Folks bumped into SMI. I don't see necessarily Linkerd and Consul and Istio changing what they're doing under the hood, but there'll be that translation layer. And the real benefits here are folks and tools like the Argo community. If Argo can just integrate into SMI and just integrate to the gateway API spec, it removes the friction from them having to support all these other things. So I can definitely see things like SMI, gateway API. Eventually, I think it's going to be a number of years, if I'm being honest, before it gets to that level of maturity and functionality. But I can totally see that being the correct abstraction layer where a lot of these rollout tools, like Argo, Flux, all these kind of things, that's where they're going to integrate. For the moment, just with the mappings across the various ingresses, across the various API gateways, there's not massive amounts of difference. Once you've learned the basics, like you can usually translate between the two. So I reckon there'll be a bit of convergence there as well, to be honest.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Will be interesting because I would love to use like a Helm chart that works everywhere, right? You don't have to add that ingress from Istio or ingress from Ambassador or ingress from, let's say, maybe other like Solo. So it would be better to have one ingress API spec that you can apply everywhere and don't, just like the features, our implementation features are behind the company that is creating it, right? So.
Yeah,
just a hope. Hopefully one day.
I think the big challenge with Ingress is the subtle differences and in requirements and implementation. Because like Ingress, I think we can all agree it's sort of the common denominator aimed for. So it became so fundamental, shall we say, that you could do the basic routing and things like that, and you could configure TLS. But if you wanted to do canarying, it didn't really support that, and there was various other use cases. So I do feel for, and again, I'm not trying to spend any negativity here because I saw some of the conversations going on in SIG networking and the other teams. Everyone was working their hardest, but to get agreement is super hard. Do you know what I mean? Like Ingress and service mesh, same deal. Like communication is hard, like as in cloud communication is hard. So I'm totally with you. I'd love that day where we can all just implement the spec because we add much more value elsewhere. Do you know what I mean? Like, but I think it's going to be a while before we get there.
Thanks, Daniel, for coming.
Yeah,
enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thanks, Daniel. And I know there are some unanswered questions. If maybe, Danny, if you're okay taking those via DMs, we can keep the meetup going. Awesome. All right. So next up, we have none other than Dan Pop, host of the Popcast. But here today, he's talking about runtime security. And the Canadian shout out, runtime security is like making Nanaimo bars. You just need the right ingredients. Without further ado, Dan, take us away.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing today? You all seeing this okay? Fantastic.
Yep. Nice.
So today, my name is Dan Papandrea. I'm the director of open source ecosystem and community at Sysdig. I work with a project called Falco. Today, we're going to talk about runtime security. And again, Nanaimo bars have been my fascination since I think I was 8 years old, the first time I had them. So those who don't know them, I have a recipe for you and it'll be part of my thing. So just to let you know, Canada is my second home. My father migrated from Italy to Toronto. And so I've been going to Toronto literally 3 times a year, like my whole life. So the guy with hair that's next to the gray haired guy that you wear in the really awesome pajamas, that's me. And then on the right was about 3 years ago there. Basically, by the way, that was not even lunch. I think that was literally just a snack. And you notice all that food, that was all literally for 4 of us. So that's basically, I have a love for you Canadians. So in terms of your ingredients for runtime security, your first runtime ingredient, I've done this talk, by the way, multiple times this year, and always revolves around runtime security, but using an analogy of ingredients for runtime security being various things. Now, I also use different technologies because I want to show the power of how Falco can integrate with many different things. And this is what you should think in terms of the your runtime security from that perspective. So system calls. When you run a program, you are making a system call. If you're doing a process, a network, file IO, and much more, if you think about your nodes, your control plane, the applications and the pods that you're running over there, those things are making system calls. And so that is a natural way for you, and also the kernel and Kubernetes and all those things, that's a natural place for you to have that level of introspection. The system call is the fundamental interface between an application and Linux kernel. That's the man page talking, that's not me, right? Now, the second ingredient for this is eBPF and also the Falco project. eBPF is a safe and efficient way for you to run programs in the kernel without having to contribute to the kernel, which we all know is a very daunting task. And so with that, from that perspective, accessing the kernel to do things like, having this progression from monitoring, securing, troubleshooting, you all know the benefits of eBPF. You all have seen like what Brendan Gregg has done. You all have seen it, like various projects like Cilium, or Tracy is another one that's out there, or like things like, I don't know, like Pixie, something from New Relic recently as well. So you know the power of it. So what is Falco? So Falco is a runtime behavioral detection engine. It's a CNCF cloud native runtime security incubating project that was created by Sysdig in 2016. It detects unexpected application behavior, and we have really wide adoption. Just like Daniel talked about, it's awesome how the community has really adopted and just contributed to the project. I mean, I saw John Pulsifar on here, a very early adopter. It was Shopify, and much love to the Shopify crew over there. But again, in terms of adoption, it's been amazing. During incubation last year, we went from 8.2 million Docker pulls to right now being 27 million, I think the latest. So I'm so loving all of that because it's purely community has helped to do this, and it's been so phenomenal. But again, in terms of what Falco does, if you look at it in three parts, it's this core engine that parses system calls at the kernel perspective, has a rules assertion level that's a YAML that lets you take those rules and say, okay, this syscall happened, but maybe I want to say there's a rule that says, okay, trigger like an event or some type of rule that you can then send outputs to. So in terms of recently, we did in terms of from the incubator project perspective, we also donated these two libs here. So if you look here, this is the Falco engine from the eBPF probe or kernel module probe perspective. Those things they're almost the secret sauce. There are two libs called the linspect and linscap, and those allow you to do captures and event parsing and those types of things. We've actually donated those to the CNCF for others to build, not have to build their own from scratch integrations to the kernel to be able to run this really deep level of introspection. I want to talk to you about the architecture. Again, I talked to you about those three core functions here. So if you look at this, there's this kernel probe, mod probe, then there's these libs, then there's a filtering expressions for any type of event. So those are triggered by rules, which I'll have a demonstration of. And then you can alert. And so what's cool is if you look at it, initially it was like syslog, file, standard IO, shout, standard out, shell, HTTPS, and gRPC. But last year, somebody, one of these awesome community contributors, we had only 3 or 4 outputs. They did something called Falco Sidekick, and you can also output the Prometheus as well. So from that perspective, let me just skip one. You can actually encode and create this Falco Sidekick as a sidecar. You can actually extend and extract to all different systems like Datadog, Prometheus, Tecton, Argo. I mean, noticed earlier we're talking about the Argo release, and we just wrote a blog. If you go to falco.org/blog, you'll see a bunch of things where we built something called the community built to contribute these blogs for response engine. So if an alert happens, you can basically have a function happen, like, okay, have like a Lambda function happen, or have, a Google Cloud function or something of that ilk. And so you already get these set of rules out of the box, which are best practices, contributed most of the community perspective, but there's 2 levels of them. There's syscall level things like access privileges, or again, remember I talked about system calls. If you're reading or writing to Bin or Etsy, any of these like common places that are bad for somebody to come into, you want to get alerted of such effects. So you have those pieces, but also we added audit log. So basically, if somebody's creating a namespace they shouldn't be, you can get alerted to that. But you can create your own custom rules, and I'll show you some examples of that during the demo. The third ingredient. You can't all have a John Pulsifer on our, or Chris Carty, all this, or Mike Foster on our roster, right? And so we need some practical knowledge. How do we do these things, right? So you want me to show you a real world example, which I'm going to do. In this case, it's not a cookie. This is going to be a Nanaimo bar recipe. So I'm going to go ahead and switch out here. All right. So my friend Chris Carty shared with me earlier his amazing recipe for Nanaimo bars. And this is basically deployed out in an environment here. So if I can go and show you this, let me just make this a little larger. Y'all seeing this okay? Let me just make this, skew this there.
Maybe a bit larger, a little bit.
Yep. Seeing this okay? Better? So you can see I have this Nginx deployment here. These are these pods that are deployed in the environment. And if I go kget pods /n Falco, I've already deployed this via a Helm chart. So you see it's a very simple Helm deployment, single to be able to deploy all those components now. You don't have to install Falco Sidekick, then Falco. It's all one Helm chart now, so it's very simple. So once that's deployed here, I look at this and I say, okay, get pods. And there's my recipe here. Now let me go ahead and go into the code itself. And you can see here. You all seeing this? Okay, let me make this a little larger. You can see that I've basically wrote this mount path. This is a daemon set that's deploying this service, this daemon set that's showing me this is the path to this Nginx container that I showed you. That's Chris Carty's amazing Nanaimo bar thing recipe. There's the mount path. There's the port I'm exposing, those types of things, right? And so if I look at this now, and I'm an attacker of some sort, I want to kind of understand what's going on. And so if you look here, right, so there's my 2 rules that I've created. And again, this is out of the box custom rules outside of the ones that you get out of the box here. So you see here, here's my Nanaimo bar tampering detector. So it's looking in that user share Nginx directory. That's what I was talking about. System calls related to file directories or those types of things. It's there. But also I got a rule here that if somebody has an outbound from this specific pod, I want to get notified of that as well. So that's the anatomy of a custom rule. And again, all I've done was just pointed to this custom rule outside of the things that are there. So let me just go ahead and exec into that Nginx pod. And I'll go bash. Oops. Oh, yeah. Probably should do -it. There we go. So I'm interactive. I'm in there. So let's just see here. And I have Falco Sidekick deployed. See, did it detect? There we go. You see, it detected that terminal shell just in the case there. So you can see it showed me, this is my secret recipes. It's showing me, let me make this a little larger. This is showing me exactly which pod this happened on. It's showing me the container registry. It's showing me the run C. It's showing me a summary based on that, just that out of box rule. Now, I'm in this here, and I might do something like this, where I'm going to that Nginx container, user share Nginx, and I want to trigger this rule that I showed you all up here. I want to show this Nanaimo bar one, right? Scene 2, and I'm gonna go. I just want to move this just to show that, like, if I tried to putz with this, what would happen? Can it move? Because read-only file system, okay, but I want to know what happened there. So go back in here, and I'm gonna go ahead and do this. And there's my Nanaimo bar detecting detector thing here. See, right? So there's yet another rule that's been triggered, right? So it's showing this, and then it's showing me, oh, emergency, sorry, Nanaimo bar tampering detected. Secure your bars, eh? Right? So again, I did that. I read that rule. So that's basically a Canadian rule that we've created here, right? So now that was probably a really bad Canadian accent. Sorry, y'all. And so there's not only that, but now I want to kind of trigger this other thing, an outbound connection from this pod. Because again, I haven't I've went ahead and I haven't done like an annotation to, I've done an annotation to others, but not this one. So now maybe I want to do something like this. apt-get install curl. Oops. There we go. If I can spell it. Install curl. www.eapple.com. Why am I not able to do that? That's weird. Oh, let me just try this from another pun. So I'm going to go ahead and go Alpine. So here, okay, get pods. And I'm going to exec into the Alpine one. I'm going to go, oops. Okay, get pods. T Alpine. Oh, that's right. Now I'm inside the pod, right? And so now I want to go ahead and see if I can ping apple.com. Right, so I'm making an outward connection, right? An outbound connection here. And there's my Nanaimo bar outbound. So let's go ahead and see if this was triggered. Oh, it was. Look at that. Go ahead and make this larger. We can see here that my Nanaimo bar thing was detected. So there's 4 things that I've done in terms of this. Now, the other part is this too, is you see how I have this outputs to GCP cloud functions? For this demo, apologies, this was supposed to work, but basically what I could do is then output this to something like a downstream sim, or in this case, maybe a function that I wrote that basically has, a function that allows me to track all the standard out as an event. So that shows you kind of how you can interact with this. But look at all those rules that we've created, right? If you go back to this, right? I can get alerted to and then have it do something like trigger a function, like we do, like deleting a pod, or maybe triggering Ambassador to do something like, do an API call to send me to a canary pod or something like this. That's what you can do with this, because you have the power of the Syscalls and the kernel to be able to really get the dissemination. But you also have these rule sets that you can create and do things like I did here, where you can take, all you need is a simple rule, a description, and this is using YAML to be able to do so. And then you can output, anything you want to, like Slack, PagerDuty, any of those types of things. I'll go back to my slides here. So what I showed you was there was a detection, right? My cookie thief. And then there was a notification, but you can see all of those things. I can send to any of these things if I want to. I can trigger a reaction of some sort, like, pausing or stopping the container or something of that ilk. But if you look at our blog right now, there's literally 6-part series for you to use this to create your own integrations and those types of things. I love the fact that we're now looking at using Sidekick to integrate with all different types of systems that are out there. So if I implore you all, take a look and star Sidekick. It's one of the best things to make Falco much more easier and digestible from a security perspective. So again, I talked to you all about, let me go and present this, make it larger. I talked to you all about getting this up and running. All you do is add this repo and you can do a Helm install, setting Sidekick UI, and then creating namespace. It does all for you. So if it'll basically, as long as you have the eBPF or something, if you're using and this example, I used the GKE instance. So I was using cause, so it uses eBPF natively. So that's how I was able to get it disinstalled quickly. And like Daniel said earlier, I love the amount of adoption, and it's great to see. I know a lot of folks Cardi's involved in the community as well, and I just love it. It's been a very cool community. We love the fact that we have people just getting involved, and I totally believe with Daniel from that perspective. It's really awesome to have folks part of the community. Take a look at falco.org. The project's in GitHub. Give it a star. Take a look at it. Get involved in the Falco community. We're on Kubernetes Slack. There's a Falco channel there. And also we're on Twitter. But also in terms of contribution, a lot of people, or if you already adopted Falco, you can PR the adopt this file. I can show you that real quick. Oops. You can see we have a various levels of folks that are contributing. You know, AWS, Red Hat. Shout out to Foster and the crew from StackRx have been phenomenal in terms of integration from, or you know, they're looking using some of our libs for some of the things that they're working on. But you can see this list has been growing phenomenally, all based on that contribution we just did recently. But what people need to understand, it's not just doing kernel, like, you know, so there's other ways you can get involved. There's integrations, there's rule set creation if you're a security professional, and also just, you know, documentation. If there's, you know, if they want to look to do some maybe French translation or something of that ilk, it's also available to you. And with that, I will stop sharing and open it up for any questions anybody has.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. I know I have some questions for you. I've seen some people commenting, was it something about sudo in a container, a default Falco rule? And I know you're breaking all the rules with that demo, so it's nice to see that all work out.
I was like a bull in a china shop, Michael.
Yeah,
bull in a china shop.
Exactly. Yeah, we need to rein you in. Just a quick sort of question about eBPF. So you're doing filtering at the kernel level. What makes eBPF so special, especially when you get to the upper level libraries where you're mixing it with, you know, typical, let's say, syscall information that you're copying to the user space, right?
So in terms of the way that we're doing that progression is to be able to get that event correlation from the user space, right? And because it has that digestible data, but also is like, if you look at trace points and the things we're doing from that trace point perspective, those are things like you don't, like I see other tools that are doing like just, you know, specific eBPF functions. We got the whole eBPF VM for you to be able to like get that, you know, that chunk that you need, and also extend that through the YAML that we do with our rule sets. I mean, the sky's the limit. We're not like saying you can only have these 5 syscalls. If things come up from a proactive perspective, if CVE comes out that's addressing something that's, you know, somebody touching the direct. If you think about last year, right? If we look at SolarWinds, right? Had you had Falco, right? You saw what I did here. I went into a pod. If I went out from that pod, if there was any type of network data that I was trying to go out from and did some function, I would have been able to got notified and I would address that. Beyond software supply chain, which is awesome. We all know what software supply chain is, right? It's, you know, if I would have had like, you know, this, you know, binary was at least vulnerable, at least from a runtime perspective, that's the capability there. So I think I took a roundabout way of answering your question, but like, yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple things, right? Like it's obviously in the kernel space, you don't have to deal with kernel modules or creating and updating them with every new version, right? And one of the things from a non-security perspective is the scalability of it, because you're filtering right at the kernel level and you're not copying everything into the user space. With containers, once you get to big clusters, right, that just becomes such a massive overhead if you want to collect all that information. So yeah, no, and
then the part of that too is like, have you ever done an actual kernel contribution? I've seen it. It's gnarly, man. It's like there's a mailing list for it, and that's what I love about eBPF. It's actually bringing the power of the kernel to the masses. Let's every one of us, any one of you all, go ahead and like create, you know, any type of eBPF program without having to like interject an actual kernel capability, which is mind blowing. I remember Gianluca Borello, who's one of our amazing principal architects. He's now with Citadel. He showed us eBPF for the first time. I'm like, this is a game changer. This is incredible. And then I saw Brendan Gregg do his thing at Netflix and chill. So basically it's phenomenal. It's great.
Yeah, awesome. So on a side note, you mentioned Falco graduation. What's in the pipeline? Falco pushing to become graduated officially in the CNCF. Timeline for that. Archie, can you tell us a little bit of give some details? No, everybody's like, I don't want to touch that question.
Not yet. I mean, it just has to be proposed for, like, they need to find a sponsor who would be actually taking this to the voting, and the community will vote. I suppose maybe towards next KubeCon.
I think the people have voted and they love Falco, right? So at the end of the day, and I love the talk. We have a great, you know, relationship with everyone in the talk, and yes, it's, you know, we're absolutely supporting the talk and whatever the decision is from that perspective. It's been fantastic. Like I said, working with the CNCF, and also like if I take off my like, you know, Sysdig hat or Falco hat and put on my CNCF ambassador, I just love the fact that we're so entrenched from that perspective and seeing that growth and seeing all the work that all the great contributors and community has done. It really is great. I love it. And shout out again to Shane Lawrence and Pulsifer from Shopify, because they've been long-standing, like just ardent supporters of Falcon. We love you guys.
Yeah, and speaking of the community, we have a big CNCF community announcement. I think as the co-chair executive producer, is that your title for Cloud Native TV? What's coming up in the pipeline with that?
So Cloud Native TV is pretty phenomenal. Again, I'm using that word a lot, but I love that word. I'm going to use it. I think I had it in my word of the day today. I'm going to use it. But so Cloud Native TV is basically we wanted to do something where it's, instead of like, doing a presentation and showing a technology, where it's the entertaining aspect of what's happening in the CNCF. So we have shows like LGTM, where raw code, if you're all familiar with David McKay, he's doing something where he's having somebody come in and contribute, like showing somebody how to contribute to a project with a project contributor. So, he's got like Containerd and Prometheus coming on. So they're going to do a live contribution on the live stream. We have a game show, like a Family Feud level trivia game show with CNCF members. So you can put together your own team out there and do that. We have, Kat Cosgrove's your unique way to basically having somebody from a project or somebody from CNCF explain a project like she was 5. She wanted to say, look how easy it is for people to get involved. Anais is doing a great show. It's 100 days of CNCF. So getting folks just, involved from that perspective. We wanted to do this, and we're launching next week on Monday, you all. So we're going to have this starting with This Week in Cloud Native, which is, again, kind of like think of it like the Sports Center for the week, just what's going on during the course of the week from that perspective. And then, my show is called Spotlight. It's very different from the podcast, because what we're doing here is more of the actual like events that make up the CNCF versus, the people. And so, but the people obviously make up those events, but it's, having us do this interactive aspect from live. And I've always done my show recorded. And so doing it live is going to be a fun challenge. And I know, Michael, you're great at the live stream, so I'm like probably going to ask you for pointers here, bud. So.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks for that compliment. So last thing, where can users learn more, get involved in Falco? I know you have a weekly Zoom call too that's open to the public for Falco, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct. So we have tomorrow, every Tuesday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard. We have community call. You can get on the docket if you join the Kubernetes Falco channel. Talk about what things you'd like to see. It's great seeing, I think, again, I'll bring the example. Sorry to put you on the spot, Shane, but like Shane was noticing some specific thing that other users were seeing as well, and having him interact with the other users and be able to, the other community folks, to be able to make Falco better was really, really cool. So, again, shout out from that. Can I give a quick plug? Anybody know I have a show called the Popcast, you all? This week, tomorrow, we're dropping somebody from this place called Workbench. It's a VC. It's amazing. This guy's a philosophy major that ended up being a venture capitalist. And I think it's awesome. We talk all the thing about Clay Fighter. We talk about Street Fighter. Come on. You gotta love that. No?
Nice plug. Yeah, check it out. I can't let you get off without answering a few questions. It's my fault. I missed the Q&A and I'm coming back to it. Is there any customizable resources if somebody doesn't want to use Helm with Falco?
Absolutely. So there's an evolution. You can use the standard daemon set to be able to deploy it. There's YAML for that perspective. So there's a repo called Evolution that has, a standard, like, here's what you need to do like YAML deployment and all of that. There's been talk of, operators. I know that was a project that I think some of the Red Hat side was looking at picking up at some point, and from the Rackham team at the time. And so that might be something that could be picked up as well. But again, this is a community contribution. If you're not seeing a CRD or something like that ilk for, or operator for doing specific things outside of what we do from a Helm perspective, go ahead. But you can also install this on native hosts as well, right? So this is a binary that runs on any of those hosts. So you don't have to use a Helm chart. So if you go to falco.org/docs, there's getting started from a learning perspective, production, all of those types of things.
Awesome. Yeah, and you mentioned community, and obviously Falco's on the CKS, and there's some common rules that come up. So is there an inventory of these common rules? Is there sort of a repo that people can go check out some of the basics, maybe a little playground environment?
Out of the box, you get those 123 rules, right? So those are already there. Those are already curated from the community, right? And so if there's ones that, this is what I love about it. Again, that's what makes for a great community. If there's ones you're not seeing, like, for instance, somebody looked up a CVE, and this is where, the Sysdig side came in and created this, this security research team created the CVE specific for like it was Kube API vulnerability. So what they did was they contributed that back to the repo. So that's where, again, you have the self-sustaining thing. And I know, for instance, like, I love what, StackRox is doing as well. StackRox is using our, the underlying libs, right? And there's, going to be much more contribution from that perspective. Guess what ends up happening, everybody? Everybody wins. Everybody wins. Everybody gets all the benefit of the core, the rules, all those type of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all the extra context. Last
and
question.
I'll say one more shout out. So Chris Cardy mentioned the Security Hub, really good as well. That's also community contributed. If you go to securityhub.dev, it has like Nginx examples, file examples, all of those you can use to get started as well. But also look at the blogs, blogosphere. Somebody, has a repo that was awesome, Falco repo, and it literally has every single resource that's been ever done on Falco. And so you can see, hey, I'm looking for example how to run this on GKE. I'm looking for example how to run this for Argo or Tecton or any of those types of things. They're already available.
All right, I got one last question, everybody. There's a survey link in there. Get to it because we're going to do the prize spin in a couple seconds. So last one is there a performance penalty for if every syscall gets intercepted? And what is sort of that process for filtering specific syscalls and not others?
I love how you bait and switch me with that, saying you weren't going to throw me any hard questions. It was really good.
Yeah,
I'm not totally calling you out on that.
No,
that's a great question. And that is any type of thing, even from, I've heard this from any type of like, monitoring or observability tools, there's always going to be some degree of penalty, right? But it's not massive. And that's also, if you look at like the community contribution, like, I've seen between 0.001% to almost 2% of total CPU on a given resource. But also look at this. If you're doing massive syscall level read writes, those are going to do something. What are they going to do? They're going to use more intensive resourcing from that perspective. And so what's the balance here is being able to, tweak the drivers that we use to be able to have that level of scalability. So it depends on the use case from that perspective. But I know that, some commercial tools as well have used the underlying capability to tweak it as well to make it better from a syscall perspective. So the answer to your question, without a doubt, I mean, there's obviously a penalty, not a steep penalty, for the amount of benefit that you get, that you just saw. Like, we were able to like literally know every single thing that happened outside of the norm from a syscall perspective. I would rather have that peace of mind than have to have $5 trillion worth of misconfiguration or security issues that are happening out there. This is not me talking, right? This is Trend Micro and Literati as well, like talking about this is the reason why, there's a lot of security configuration issues. And I know Magno's out there. Shout out to Magno. So
yeah, one of the big things too is filtering at the source in the kernel means less upstream in your other applications. Speaking from StackRox, when it's filtered and you're getting the right events and all your networking calls, it just means that you can create better context. So yeah, love it. Pop, thanks for coming on. Appreciate all the extra context and a ton of places to check you out. So
I'm everywhere. I'm everywhere.
Yeah,
I'm
seriously.
trying to keep up with Archie. That's what it is.
We have some Falco presence today from the draw, so thanks for contributing on that, Dan.
Yeah, we have 4 spins to give. So we got socks, a mask, a shirt, and a sweater.
Are you gonna spin it, Michael?
I have the spin ready. There was, it looks like we got 4 last responses in. So let me just copy the last 4 that just got their names in, and I'll share my screen. All right.
I'll be taking notes who is the winner, and we're gonna post it on the Slack channel to make sure without doing any tricks here.
Okay. Who we got for? Oh, I see Magno got his name in there. We'll see.
Mike, do you think you can put the names, or it's okay? Because we.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Oh, I put the emails up. Yeah, I mean, I can probably get the names.
Yes.
Although I have to repaste it though.
But we're gonna take this one. It's just for security reasons. We don't like to put emails.
Oh, true.
Since you guys all security folks.
Stop sharing.
Yeah. We're gonna cut this.
Good point. All right, hold on.
But we have a first winner, so the first winner getting sock, and it is. I took the email, so.
Nobody else saw it though, right? Everybody else, close your eyes. Okay, there we go.
So we're going for second prize. Second is going to be the mask.
Oh, look at that.
Ah, Jonathan.
Pulsifer.
This is rigged.
He
And the third is the T-shirt.
Yeah. I'll probably reach out for the sizing for the T-shirt.
Jonathan's saying roll again. He's not for the mask. So.
Thomas. Sebastian, congrats.
And lastly.
Hey, I want to give a shout out to one of those rules, by the way, to Ricardo Katz. Actually, that was a blog he wrote. So he wrote it's a phenomenal use case that he did. So I actually adopted that rule from Ricardo's example. So shout out, Ricardo.
I think that's it. I took all the notes, Michael. So we're good. I'm gonna post it on the Slack channel now, the winners, and you don't need to spin more because we have 4 prizes. Otherwise,
all right, sounds good.
Cool, amazing. So we hope to see Dan live once we get back to normal. Once we get all vaccinated.
I want poutine, Nanaimo bars, beaver tails. I want all of them. And steak with you, Foster. You ready?
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll bring the beaver tail. You buy the steak.
And thanks to Daniel as well for joining us. So we'll see you all next time.
Thanks, Daniel.
Yeah.
Thanks, y'all.
Good to see you.
Thanks,
yeah,
everyone.
we're
Take
going to
care.
post recording shortly as well. So see everyone. Enjoy, and hopefully we'll see each other maybe in August now, because we're deciding to take a small break for the meetups. Just give everyone to enjoy the outdoors barbecues and do things. But we're going to be back around the August timeframe, unless we're going to have Kelsey Hightower or some cool speaker that we really need to do an event.
What about Daniel tonight? What do we chop liver?
Yeah, it's always Kelsey Hightower. We love Kelsey, right?
Well, we never got Kelsey. We tried for it 5 years now and never had a chance. So maybe one day. All right. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy. Thanks, Michael Foster, for joining us and helping with the first event. Take care.